Hey guys, it's Cody Jones with Jangus Genetics LLC. We've had a lot of interest in our winter grazing conversation the other day about stockpile grazing. And so I'm probably a little late to this, but seems like this time of year, finances are coming due on everything. Taxes are coming up. And it just seems like I really get caught up doing a lot of planning for the next year, trying to figure out how everything's going to fit together. And one of the things that I really need to get done here pretty quick, probably should already have done, is figuring out how many cow days I actually have left. So I could be a little bit lazy. I bought enough hay to go through the winter. Basically, I bought about 1,000 pounds per cow per month is kind of what I'm figuring. So something like that. About 4 months is what I was figuring on. Figured if I could make it to the 1st of January, which we're pretty well there now. 1st of January, that'd be February, March, April, January, February, March, and April. And we normally have grass by the end of April. My grandpa always says, hay to May, hay to May, hay to May, hay to May. And I've seen big snowstorms in April. I've seen snowstorms in May. So that's important for us. But normally we have some grass growing whether we get snow or not. And in the regenerative side of things, my goal is to not have to feed hardly any hay, but especially to have some grass left over in the spring. Even if I have to feed some hay and leave some grass, I want to have some tall dead stuff so those cows can help balance their diet. When the grass gets sweet in the spring, those cows won't eat hardly any hay. You could put out the best alfalfa bales and they might nibble on them, but if you've ever worked calves in the spring, you'll know that it really stinks to be the guy that has to stand behind them, because their manure is just so loose and so watery and so wet, it's just squirting out of them. And the reason for that is they don't have enough dry matter to balance their diet. The energy and the protein in that grass is excellent, and they just don't have enough protein to balance their diet. So the goal here, and what I'm doing, is to leave enough grass, at least 30 days worth of something. And it doesn't have to be a lot. When I was taking Greg Judy's grazing school, he says, 2 to 4 inches is really just enough to get a good start, but you got to have something. And so that's my goal. And you can see behind me here, what I'm doing is I've gone on one of the tools that I use is just Google Earth. I used to use some tools that NRCS recommend, or NRCS or FSA recommended. I did the local county grazing school. It was Boone County, but it was Missouri State Grazing School. I don't know, whatever. It was like $150. You got to do it to get their cost share, and I still haven't used their cost share, but I did take the class. So it was a good place to start. They recommended some books that I've read. The Stockman Grass Farmer magazine is awesome. It was the first time I'd ever been introduced to cow days per acre. Now I use animal unit days because it transfers no matter what size animal I've got, including sheep. I just figure on my animal unit days. And so that's really the tool. And so what I'm doing here today is I'm trying to figure out just about how many animal unit days I'm going to get on each big section of the farm. And I'm going to break that down, and that'll let me know pretty close how much hay I'm going to have to feed, or should. And of course, don't take anything that I'm saying as gold. It's a learning curve. This is the first year that I've really worked really hard at not feeding hay. Not that I haven't worked at it before, but I've always kind of figured, don't worry about feeding hay after January. Just get to January 1st and you did a good job, because most people in my area feed hay for 5 to 6 months out of the year. But it's a big cost in my pocketbook. It's actually probably my biggest sheep killer, feeding hay to sheep. Big round bales is what I've always used, and they'll fall over on sheep. The racks will fall apart and fall over on sheep. Sheep will get stuck in the racks. I don't know what it is about sheep and round bales, but that's been the worst killer of sheep that I've had so far. So that's not good at all, other than a giant rainstorm and hailstorm and ice storm all at the same time in March. Last time I had baby lambs in March, that was we don't do that anymore. So anyway, I'm gonna flip you around. I'm gonna show you what I'm looking for here, and we'll kind of tell you what my process is. I'm no expert. I remember when I did that Missouri grazing school, they gave us a grazing stick, and that was a cool tool. And so I've always kind of gone off that, and you have to adjust your grazing eye. You get experience with that over time. There's really no other way to explain it. Honestly, I'm sure there's people out there who are going to hate this about me, but I still see everything in bales. So, you know, growing up, my dad would say, how many bales are they going to make an acre? I'd be like, well, they're going to make 2. And he goes, okay, I think it'll make 2 too. And then it made 2. And so I was trained in running bales. And so I'm figuring on 1,000-pound bales. I also figure on 1,000-pound animal units. So the math all kind of flows in together. So what I'm doing, again, this is going to sound complicated. It's really not. If you get confused, ask me, I'll make some more videos and slow it down. I know I'm not being extremely clear here, but a cow is going to eat roughly 3% of her body weight a day. When I'm feeding hay, I'm unrolling it, or I'm bale grazing it, I figure about 5%. When it's really cold, they eat more, they waste more. And for me, I think that's important when I'm just feeding hay as a tool. You got to keep those cattle warm to keep them alive, especially when they're feeding a baby calf like my fall calving cows. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. But 3% is a good average. If I'm figuring hay, I'm figuring 5 to 20% waste. You have to figure out what works for you, depending on how I'm feeding it, rings, unrolling, or bale grazing. And so those are just the different options I've tried, and I like them all. There's benefits and non-benefits to all of them. Bale grazing is great for saving on labor. You just stick the bales out, unwrap them, and then you roll up. You have wires that break them apart, and so you could just give those cattle what they need for a day or a week or a month or whatever you're willing. The less often you move, the more you're going to waste. You have to remember that when you're figuring in your how much hay you're going to need. But you know, if you got to go on vacation or something, seems like my wife always wants to do something in January, and bale grazing is a good way to do that. It's my area. If you're feeding real good alfalfa hay, you don't lose much. Maybe one season it'll grow up in weeds, and then after that it's just really fertile ground. If you're feeding grass hay, it might sit there for a year or two. Milo stalks might sit there for a year or two before it really turns into weeds, and then it goes back to grass. But I like to bale graze where I'm going to run sheep and I don't have to worry about the weeds, or you can rotary mow it if it bothers you. But normally it seems like 2 or 3 years down the road, you can't tell, other than maybe that spot's a little bit more green because they put more nutrition there. I've done some other videos about that. You can check out my channel, and it's good. It's a good experience. And like I said, if you don't have a tractor, it's a great way to do it too. I borrowed a tractor from my dad, 4-wheel drive cab, nice heat and air. You could rent one. It's probably the way I should do it, and the way I do it now. But I'd sit out 30 days worth of hay, and I'd unroll them, unwrap them. That would take me about 4 hours on 40 or 50 cows. And then I would have 2 hot wires. I'd have one on the front and then one behind, and I just take the one on the front, move it behind, and then the cows would have, however many bales I want them to have. With bale and rolling, it's my favorite way to feed. It's more time intensive, more labor intensive. You got to have the equipment to do it. I don't have a Greg Judy bale unroller, but I've heard good things. My neighbor actually makes them. I need to get one probably, but haven't done it yet. My way that I used to do it when I had a few cows is I would just take the tractor and I'd put the bucket down and I'd get it started, especially at the top of a hill, and then I could manually push them down the hill, and that works pretty good as long as you remember which way the bale's wrapped up. I'm not very good about it. I have a bale unroller on my tractor, and that works probably really good, but if you're feeding 3, 4, 5, 10 bales a day, man, it's a lot of labor and a lot of time sitting on a tractor seat. Traditionally, we'd feed in rings. We'd just have a sacrifice spot, and we'd just put bales in the rings. You'd wait a couple days, and the rings would get lower, or racks, or whatever you call them, and then you just add a couple more bales on top. Bale rings are pretty dangerous. Like I said, with my sheep experience, bale rings could be pretty dangerous. If you put 2, we used to stack 2 on top of each other, and the problem is they eat the bottom one, and then the top bale falls down and squish them. Calves will get caught in racks, especially in the summertime when there's nothing in them. It just seems like a baby calf, or I've seen bulls flip them up over themselves and freak out. And I've heard some horror stories, especially as those racks get older. They rot on the bottom, they get more dangerous. There's things to consider there, but it is a good, efficient way to do it. There's not a lot of waste. In Missouri, we get a lot of mud, so they're going to put in they're usually in the springtime, they're going to have a pretty good ring around that bale. If you move the ring or the rack every time you put in a new bale, that can help. And I've thought about doing that, but that also requires a tractor. I ended up instead of using racks and buying racks for myself, I just ended up bale grazing. It worked better for me. but the racks are more efficient. They're going to waste less. They will eat it. They will eat all the way on an alfalfa bale. They'll eat it all. They'll clean it up, period. And there's no waste, which, you know, if you're figuring, I also kind of figure I don't buy fertilizer, so my hay, whatever's left over, is going to be organic matter and fertilizer. So there's no fertilizer left. It all goes through the cow there when they're eating it all. So something to think about. But those are the 3 ways that I've fed hay. Little squares and stuff, you know, for me, they're kind of I don't feed grains, so sometimes I do like to have some good high quality alfalfa bales around just for moving sheep or doing whatever. Yeah, it's kind of handy, but it's not just not practical from a labor standpoint. I'm not going to be out there feeding little square bales to my cows like my grandpa used to do when he had to, because they didn't have big round bales or tractors to haul them. It's just too labor intensive. I'm not going to do it. So for those who like to do it, it's much better hay. Usually, you know, you can control the quality if the quantity quite a bit better. If you're just wanting to feed exactly what they eat and you've only got a few head, little square bales are probably a good way to do it. But they're more expensive anymore just because of the labor point. Same for me, same for the guy who's putting them up. The kids, they used to have high school kids load them up. Those high school kids are gone now. Now you have to buy a big bale bundler that goes out and bales up all the little bales and puts them in a big bundle so you can move them with a skid loader and then feed them out by hand, which for those of you who have horses, that's probably how you're doing it now. And it's really neat to see, but again, it's pretty labor intensive, especially up to scale. So I'll flip you around. I'm going to show you what I'm looking for. Again, do your own research on this. This is just me and in my opinion and what I'm going off of, and I'm probably wrong. So do your own research, but this is a baseline, and I think the principles will still apply no matter where you're at, even if my numbers are wrong. So I used to have a grazing stick, and I never can find the darn thing. But this is a paddock we've been pulled off of here since beginning of September, I think. And I don't know what to do anymore about the brown stuff in here. It's kind of like straw, but filler also. So the most accurate thing you could probably do is get it forage tested and figure out how much you want to leave, and then have the rest of it forage tested. So I would probably go down here about leaving 4 to 5 inches, especially like we said, if I was going to graze all my farm and not come back again, I want to leave some so they have some to come back to in the spring when it's real lush, so they have some dead stuff. But I always like to leave at least 4 to 6 inches, no matter what time of year it is or what I'm doing. I'm not saying I get that accomplished, but that's kind of my goal. So, and then Ian Mitchell Ennis in the Greg Judy grazing school I took, he said that, you know, you want to graze your grass from the ground up. So in the springtime it's real short and you want to take a little bit, and then the next time you want it to get a little taller, leave a little bit more, and then you want to leave a little bit more, and then you get to where we're at here with this stockpile. And I'm pretty proud of this. Again, we haven't been on here for a while. It takes a lot of planning to get here, but anyway, if we figure, you know, you kind of see the base of the plant here. That's where the leaves are going to be shooting out next spring. So let's take it a little bit above that. And my hand's, I don't know, about 6 inches if you include my thumb. So we'll call that probably about 10 inches of good grass, give or take. And in the springtime, in the growing season, I figure an inch of fescue, preferably with some red clover in it, it's going to be about 300 pounds of dry matter per acre. And you may want to get your pencil out and write this down. I may have to say it a couple times in my mind to process it out loud here without my pen and paper. But so an inch of good fescue is 300 pounds of dry matter per acre. And on a 1,000-pound cow at 3% of her body weight, you need 30 pounds of dry matter per day. So most people don't have 1,000-pound cows. And if you're running sheep or something else, you know, no matter what class you got, let's convert that to animal units. So we're going to talk as animal units is going to be a 1,000-pound animal unit. It's going to be 30 pounds of dry matter. So that's pretty easy. So if we have 10 inches of grass, that's going to be 3,000 pounds of dry matter. 10 inches times 300, 3,000. Divided by 30. Yeah, so that's going to be about 100 cow days an acre. That's too much. I know from my experience, that's way more than we're going to get off of this. So I know my math's wrong, and that's kind of just where that experience comes from. This grass isn't that good. I would say that we are probably going to get closer. If this is a 5-acre paddock that we're in, I'm not going to stay in here. I've kind of decided two days in here, probably 2.5. You could probably get 3, but two to be safe. With 80,000 pounds, so that's 160,000 pounds, or 160 cow days, and we were figuring there'd be 500 in here. So we're going to take about, you could take about half of this. So two to 3 days is probably about. So I made a blunder in the video that I just shot, and I was figuring on 10 inches, and what happened is I came in over here next to this gate, and I looked straight down, and I just started doing the math on the grass that was here. But I was at the farthest point away from shade and water on the whole paddock. And so when I came back up to the top of the hill to grab a piece of trash, I'm like, oh, that's why my grazing eye was telling me I was being dumb. So we've got some grass up here I don't want to take 2 or 3 inches off of. It's just really short. And so when you average it all out, 2 days on here is probably all we're going to get. Again, maybe 3 days if everything's really good. I know that I've got some better grass up over this hill too. Cattle they're going to graze a little bit differently in the wintertime. They don't have to worry about the heat and the stress of the heat in the winter in the water tanks and in the shade. So they can graze a little more evenly across these paddocks, which is, a good thing that we're grazing different times of the year. But we don't want to overgraze. So 2 days is probably going to be what we're planning on in here. And yeah, so that's where my mistake was. But thank you guys for following along. And I make mistakes, like I said. I'm still learning this too, and I just wanted to share where that one was at, because you might make the same. So, in here, thanks. Maybe a little bit less, but if they're going to eat more, they're going to waste more. And I think just always give yourself a little extra room for error, because it's cheaper to leave a little grass than it is to buy a little hay, especially in March, because everybody's fed all the good stuff, and everybody's trying to get to grass, and anybody who's buying hay is just usually going to be spending an arm and a leg to get it. So leave yourself a little buffer. You'll thank yourself later. That's, again, I always figure it. I've seen my cows eat as much as 5% a day, and that included the waste and everything. But it's a learning experience. You need to figure out your numbers, and the numbers are important. If you don't want to figure out your numbers, that's fine, but you better have enough hay to compensate for your ignorance. And I have a lot of ignorance. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm right there with you. I bought enough hay to go through the whole winter. So I got to protect my cows from my ignorance. That's what I like to say. They're learning. I'm learning. We're all getting better at this. And the more I know, the less I have to have. And so that's true with the survival schools that I've taken. I enjoy those kinds of things, just being outdoors and outdoorsy type of things. But it's also true in business. The more you know, the less you have to have. So, yep, that's kind of the process that I'm going through. I hope it makes sense. Just to recap, I'm going to go around for the most part, I've got about 5 big sections on this big farm here, and I'm going to go estimate. I think we're taking about, again, I go back to how many bales, but you can transfer that into how many units you're going to take off, and it's the same thing. It's the same math. So if we're pulling 100 cow days an acre here, we're probably on the next section that we pulled off of grazing, we're probably looking at closer to 60 to 80, and then those kinds of things. But again, that's too much here. I'd say, I was saying 100, so if we take half of that, that'd be 50, and that makes a lot more sense. So 50 here, and then we're probably looking at 30, 40, and then hopefully we're not going to come back around to the stuff we've already grazed for more than just a quick clip, or we'll have to start feeding some hay over there when we get there. So it'll be about right if we can leave that much for spring, and I think that I've got enough buffer built in here to get it done. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you sticking with me. It's a learning process for me. I enjoy talking about it, teaching it, sharing it. if you guys have any questions about the math that I've done or where I get my numbers, there's some good online resources. You can Google how many cow days per acre on your forage, talk to some other guys that are doing it in your area. This is pretty area specific. You know, I just listened to a podcast, somebody was talking about grazing corn stalks and how many cow days an acre you get on corn stalks. Just make sure that they're using the same numbers, whether it's cow days, ask them how big are your cows, because if you're figuring on 1,500 pound cows, which is average, and you've got $700 or 700 pound feeder heifers, or 150 pound sheep, or your cows are just like mine, they're about 1,200 pounds, that math is not going to translate the same. So make sure that it would be great if we could just all use animal units. It's 1,000 pounds at 3%, that's 30 pounds a day, but I think everybody's using what's practical for them. So make sure you clarify that before you run your numbers. But anyway, if you guys like this kind of stuff, if you like this video, if you're learning something, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow me for more, and feel free to ask some questions too. Thanks.